Blood pooled beneath the massive German shepherd, its coat matted and dark against the roadside gravel. 8-year-old Emma Wilson froze, her school backpack slipping from her shoulder as she spotted the animal's broken body. Most children would have run away. Most adults would have shaken their heads and kept walking. But Emma wasn't most people. The evening sun cast long shadows across the country road as she approached cautiously, her heart pounding against her small chest. The dog's rib cage barely moved with shallow breaths. One leg twisted at an impossible angle, bone visible through torn flesh. Emma knelt beside the dying animal, tears welling in her eyes. "It's okay," she whispered, though nothing was okay at all. When her small hand gently touched the dog's head, something miraculous happened. The shepherd's eyes, deep amber and clouded with pain, opened slightly, and then the faintest movement. His tail thumped once against the ground. In that moment, as their eyes met, something unbreakable formed between them. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Emma Wilson hadn't always been the quiet girl who walked home alone. Before her mother's death 2 years ago, she'd been full of laughter, with friends who filled their modest home with noise and life. Now, at 8 years old, Emma spoke mostly through her artwork, delicate watercolors that captured emotions her words couldn't express. The small town of Millfield had fallen on hard times. The manufacturing plant that once employed half the town had closed, leaving families like the Wilsons struggling to make ends meet. Emma's father, Robert, worked double shifts at the local hardware store and as a night security guard, his eyes perpetually ringed with exhaustion. He did everything he could for Emma, except understand her. Their small white clapboard house sat at the edge of town, where Emma lived with her father and grandmother, Margaret. Margaret, with her silver hair always neatly pinned and hands smelling of lavender lotion, had moved in after Caroline Wilson lost her battle with cancer. While Robert retreated into work and silence, Margaret became Emma's emotional anchor. "Your mother's spirit lives in your paintings," Margaret would say, watching Emma mix colors at the kitchen table each evening. Those paintings, scenes of meadows, animals, and sometimes her mother's face from memory, sold for $5 each at school fundraisers. Emma kept the money in a mason jar labeled "Family Help," hidden beneath her bed. At Millfield Elementary, Emma sat alone at lunch, her small shoulders hunched as she sketched in her notebook. The other children had learned to leave her alone, except for Lily Henderson and her friends, who delighted in knocking Emma's art supplies to the floor or whispering, "Weird Emma," when she passed by. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Collins, recognized the girl's talent, but worried about her withdrawal from everything except her art. "She's holding too much inside," she had told Principal Dawson during their last meeting. What no one knew was that Emma had started taking a different route home from school, one that passed by the struggling Millfield Veterinary Clinic, where she would press her nose against the window, watching the animals inside. It was the only place besides home where her tight chest would loosen, where she felt something like happiness again. The clinic, like many businesses in town, had a final week sign hanging in the window. Another piece of Millfield slowly disappearing. Emma hadn't meant to take the long way home that Tuesday afternoon. Her father had repeatedly warned her to come straight back after school. No detours, no exceptions. But the thought of stopping by the veterinary clinic again, just for a minute, to see the new litter of kittens in the window, had been too tempting. That's when she saw him. The German shepherd sprawled across the gravel shoulder of Oak Ridge Road, less than a quarter mile from the clinic. Emma's first instinct was to run for help, but something about the dog's stillness made her approach instead. Up close, the animal's injuries were far worse than she'd first realized. Deep gashes ran along his flank, his fur matted with dirt and blood, one front leg bent at a sickening angle. But he was breathing, barely, but still breathing. "Please don't die," Emma whispered, dropping to her knees. She shrugged off her jacket despite the autumn chill and gently laid it over the dog's trembling body. His eyes, when they flickered open, held no aggression, only pain and something that looked remarkably like resignation. Emma glanced desperately up and down the empty road. The afternoon school bus had already passed, and this stretch rarely saw much traffic. Tears sprang to her eyes as the dog released a soft whimper that seemed to pierce straight through her heart. "Help!" she shouted, her voice small against the vastness of the open field surrounding them. "Somebody help us!" As if answering her plea, a pickup truck appeared on the horizon. Emma leapt to her feet, waving her arms frantically. The truck slowed, then pulled onto the shoulder. Mr. Peterson, who ran the local hardware store where her father sometimes worked weekends, stepped out. "Emma Wilson? What in the world are you—" His words cut short when he saw the injured animal. "Good Lord!" "He's dying, Mr. Peterson," Emma said, her voice breaking. "We have to take him to Dr. Bennett. Please." Mr. Peterson rubbed his stubbled chin, eyeing the massive dog warily. "That's not a stray, Emma. That's a German shepherd. Might be dangerous, even injured. We should call animal control." "There's no time," Emma insisted. "The clinic is right down the road. Please, Mr. Peterson." "I'll never ask for anything again." Perhaps it was the desperation in her voice or the memories of his own daughter, now grown and moved away, but Mr. Peterson sighed in resignation. "Your father's gonna have my hide," he muttered, but he was already moving toward the tailgate of his truck. Together they managed to slide Emma's jacket under the massive dog, using it as a makeshift stretcher. The animal weighed far more than Emma had expected, and he released a heart-wrenching yelp when they lifted him. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaking through the dirt on her face. "We're trying to help you." The Millfield Veterinary Clinic was minutes from closing when Mr. Peterson's truck screeched to a halt outside. Dr. Sarah Bennett was locking the medication cabinet when her assistant rushed in. "Emergency in the parking lot. It's bad, Doc." What followed was a blur for Emma, the rush of activity as the dog was carefully transferred to an examination table, Dr. Bennett's grave expression as she assessed his injuries, the rhythmic beeping of machines suddenly attached to the massive animal. "He's lost a lot of blood," Dr. Bennett explained, gently kneeling to Emma's eye level. "Multiple lacerations, broken leg, possible internal injuries. Honestly, I'm surprised he's held on this long." "But you can fix him, right?" Emma asked, clutching her backpack straps. The veterinarian hesitated. "Emma, treatments like this are very expensive, and without an owner—" She sighed. "Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is end their suffering." "No," Emma's voice came out sharper than she intended. "He fought to stay alive this long. He wants to live." Dr. Bennett's examination continued as Emma watched with bated breath. When the veterinarian cleaned around the dog's neck, something metallic glinted beneath the matted fur. "Hold on," Dr. Bennett murmured, carefully extracting a half-buried dog tag. She cleaned it with an antiseptic wipe, then held it up to the light. "Canine unit. His name is Max. He was a service dog." "A hero dog," Emma whispered, a flutter of hope rising in her chest. Dr. Bennett nodded slowly. "Yes, but even heroes need someone to fight for them. The surgeries, medication, rehabilitation. We're talking thousands of dollars, Emma." Emma straightened her small shoulders, a determination settling over her that seemed far beyond her 8 years. "I have money saved, and I can sell more paintings. I can work at the clinic after school. I'll do anything." Mr. Peterson, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, cleared his throat. "I think we should call your father now, Emma." The girl nodded, but her eyes never left the German shepherd. "His name is Max," she said softly, "and I'm going to save him." Robert Wilson's truck skidded into the veterinary clinic parking lot with such force that gravel sprayed against the building. His face, normally composed despite his exhaustion, was a mask of barely contained anger and worry. Emma saw him through the waiting room window and felt her stomach twist into knots. "Emma, Catherine Wilson," he said as he burst through the door, his voice low but trembling with emotion. "What have you done?" Before she could answer, Dr. Bennett emerged from the examination room, wiping her hands on a towel. "Mr. Wilson, I'm Dr. Sarah Bennett. Your daughter found an injured service dog on Oak Ridge Road." "A dog?" Robert's eyes darted from the veterinarian to his daughter. "You had Mr. Peterson drive you here for a stray dog?" "He's not a stray, Dad," Emma said, her voice small but determined. "His name is Max. He was a rescue dog, and he's hurt really bad." Dr. Bennett gestured toward her office. "Perhaps we could speak privately, Mr. Wilson." Emma watched them disappear behind the frosted glass door, straining to hear their muffled voices. Mr. Peterson awkwardly patted her shoulder before excusing himself to get back to his store. Left alone in the waiting room, Emma crept toward the examination room where Max lay sedated, connected to IV fluids and monitoring equipment. He looked both smaller and larger on the metal table. Smaller because of his vulnerability, larger because of what he represented to her, something she could save when she couldn't save her mother. 20 minutes passed before the office door opened. Robert's face was ashen as he approached his daughter. "Emma, we're going home." "But, Max, Dr. Bennett is keeping him comfortable tonight, but tomorrow—" He knelt to her level, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Emma, that dog needs surgeries we can't afford. Multiple operations, months of care. I have $217 from my paintings," Emma said, her chin trembling but her gaze steady. "And I'll earn more." Robert closed his eyes briefly. "The surgery alone is $4,000. "Then I'll raise it. Please, Dad." "Since Mom died, I haven't asked for anything, not birthday parties or new shoes or—" Her voice broke. "I found him for a reason. Dogs are dangerous, Emma. You know what happened to me when I was a boy. Max isn't dangerous. He's hurt and alone and scared, just like—" She stopped herself, but the words hung between them. "Just like me." Robert stood and turned away, running a hand through his hair. "We have your grandmother's medications, the mortgage, your school expenses. I work 2 jobs already, Emma." "Mr. Wilson," Dr. Bennett interjected quietly from the doorway. "The clinic closes in 2 weeks. Funding cuts, not enough clients. This would be one of my last surgeries here anyway. I'm sorry to hear that, doctor, but it doesn't change our situation." "Dad," Emma tried once more, tears now streaming freely down her face. "Mom would have helped him." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. Caroline had always been the one to bring home strays, injured birds, abandoned kittens. She'd had a heart that couldn't turn away from suffering. And here was her daughter, so much her mother's child, asking for the one thing he wasn't sure he could give. "Let me show you something," Emma said, pulling out her sketchbook from her backpack. She flipped to a page showing a charcoal drawing of their family: Robert, Emma, Margaret, and Caroline, all smiling with a large dog sitting beside them. "I drew this last week. I didn't know why I put a dog in our family, but now I do." Robert's hand trembled as he touched the sketch. "When did you get so good at drawing?" "Mom taught me, before." Back at home that evening, dinner was a silent affair. Margaret watched her son and granddaughter push food around their plates, sensing the tension, but waiting for one of them to speak first. "Emma found an injured police dog today," Robert finally said. "German Shepherd, hit by a car, needs expensive surgery." Margaret's eyes widened slightly. "And Emma wants to save him, but we can't afford it." "I have money saved," Emma interjected, looking at her grandmother pleadingly, "and I can sell more paintings. Dr. Bennett said she'd let us make payments." Margaret studied Emma's face for a long moment before turning to her son. "Robert, when your father died, I thought the grief would swallow me whole. The only thing that saved me was having something to care for. You. This isn't the same, Mom. Isn't it?" This child has lost so much. If she's found something to pour her heart into, a dangerous animal that could turn on her at any moment." Robert's voice rose. "You know what happened to me as a kid. That German Shepherd nearly took my arm off." Emma gasped. Her father had never told her the full story of his dog attack, only that he'd been bitten as a child. "That was a different dog, a different time," Margaret said gently. "The answer is no," Robert said, standing abruptly. "I'm sorry, Emma." Later that night, Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, counting the money in her mason jar again as if the amount might magically have increased. $217.39. Her life's savings from selling small watercolors and helping Mrs. Abernathy from next door with her garden. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "May I come in?" Margaret asked, already stepping through the doorway. She sat on the edge of Emma's bed, her arthritis making the movement slow and deliberate. "Your father loves you very much, you know." "But he doesn't understand," Emma whispered. "Maybe not yet," Margaret agreed. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out an envelope. "This is my Social Security money I've been setting aside for emergencies." She pressed the envelope into Emma's small hands. $800. Not enough, but a start. "Grandma, I can't take this." "You're not taking, I'm giving. Sometimes the right path isn't the easy one, Emma." She squeezed her granddaughter's hand. "Tomorrow we'll go to your school and speak with your principal about a proper fundraiser. Perhaps that nice art teacher could help organize a special sale of your work." For the first time since finding Max, Emma felt a flutter of real hope. "Do you think Dad will ever understand?" Margaret's smile was gentle but knowing. "Your father has his own wounds to heal, my dear. Perhaps this is the beginning of that, too." Principal Dawson leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled as he considered Emma's proposal. The girl sat across from his desk, her grandmother's steadying hand on her shoulder. Despite her small stature, there was something formidable in Emma's unwavering gaze. "Let me see if I understand correctly," he said. "You'd like to hold an emergency art sale this Friday in the school gymnasium to raise money for a dog surgery?" "Not just any dog, sir," Emma said. "Max was a canine officer. He saved people. Now he needs someone to save him." Principal Dawson's eyes softened. In his 15 years at Millfield Elementary, he'd watched this community weather factory closures, floods, and economic hardship. He'd seen how the children often absorbed the adults' stress like silent sponges. Emma Wilson had been one of those quiet absorbers since losing her mother. "Mrs. Wilson," he addressed Margaret, "is Emma's father on board with this project?" The older woman's hesitation was brief but noticeable. "My son is processing the situation, but he knows how important this is to Emma." This wasn't entirely true. Robert had left for his night shift without another word about Max, the silence between father and daughter stretching like a chasm. But Margaret believed in what they were doing, even if her son couldn't see it yet. Principal Dawson seemed to read between the lines. "Miss Jackson, our art teacher, has always spoken highly of Emma's talent. I believe she'd be willing to help coordinate." He checked his calendar. 3 days isn't much time to organize an event. "Please," Emma said, the single word carrying the weight of everything she couldn't articulate. Her loneliness since her mother's death, her father's emotional absence, and now this unexpected connection to a wounded creature who somehow mirrored her own brokenness. "All right," he nodded, making a quick note. "I'll announce it tomorrow morning, but, Emma, you should prepare yourself. We may not raise all the money needed." "We have to try," she replied simply. By lunchtime the next day, word of Emma's hero dog had spread throughout Millfield Elementary. Ms. Jackson transformed her art class into a production studio, helping students create posters to hang around town. Emma worked tirelessly, producing small watercolors and sketches that Ms. Jackson assured her would sell quickly. Not everyone was supportive, however. "You're so weird, Wilson," Lily Henderson remarked. watching Emma paint during recess instead of joining the other children on the playground. "It's just some mangy stray. They should put it down." Emma's brush paused mid-stroke, but she didn't look up. "He's not a stray, he's a hero. Heroes don't end up half dead in ditches," Lily snickered, walking away to rejoin her friends. That afternoon, Emma convinced her grandmother to take her to the veterinary clinic. Dr. Bennett greeted them with cautious optimism. "He made it through the night," she said, leading them to a kennel area in the back. "We've stabilized him and given him fluids and antibiotics, but he'll need surgery soon to properly set that leg and address some internal injuries." Max lay on a blanket, an IV in his front leg and bandages covering the worst of his wounds. His tail thumped weakly against the floor when he saw Emma. "He remembers me," she whispered, kneeling by the kennel door. "Animals sense more than we give them credit for," Dr. Bennett said. "He knows you helped him." Emma carefully extended her hand through the kennel bars. Max strained forward to lick her fingers, the small gesture requiring visible effort. "How soon does he need the surgery?" Margaret asked. Dr. Bennett's expression grew more serious. "Ideally within the next few days. The risk of infection increases the longer we wait, and that broken leg needs proper surgical repair if he's ever going to walk normally again." "We're having a fundraiser on Friday," Emma explained, her eyes never leaving the dog. "My whole school is helping." Dr. Bennett smiled, though there was a sadness behind it. "That's wonderful, Emma. Every bit will help." She hesitated before adding, "I've also reached out to some rescue organizations that specialize in former service dogs, but most are overwhelmed right now." Margaret nodded her understanding. Resources were stretched thin everywhere, not just in Millfield. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Bennett pulled Margaret aside. "Mrs. Wilson, I should mention, Max's injuries are consistent with being struck by a vehicle, but some of the wounds appear defensive." "What are you saying, Doc?" "I'm saying someone may have abandoned this dog after he was injured rather than getting him the care he needed. The tag indicates he was once part of a canine unit, but there's no microchip, which is unusual for service dogs." Margaret glanced at Emma, who was saying a tearful goodbye to Max. "Does Emma need to know this?" "No," Bennett replied softly. "But if someone comes looking for him, we'll cross that bridge if we come to it." That evening, Margaret was preparing dinner when she noticed Emma sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone with a puzzled expression. "What is it, dear?" "Someone anonymous just donated $500 to Max's surgery fund," Emma said, showing her grandmother the fundraising page Ms. Jackson had helped her create. "It just says, 'For the hero and his guardian.'" Margaret leaned closer to see, a curious smile playing at her lips. "Well, that's certainly a blessing." Before Emma could respond, the front door opened and closed with Robert's familiar heaviness. He entered the kitchen, his face drawn with fatigue from another double shift. "There's a casserole in the oven," Margaret said. "Should be ready in 10 minutes. Robert nodded his thanks, then finally looked at his daughter. "Principal Dawson called me today." His shoulders tensed. "About Max's fundraiser? About how you've been skipping recess to paint for 3 days straight, and how Miss Jackson says you're showing renewed purpose." He sat down across from her. "You really care about this dog, don't you?" "He needs someone, Dad, like we needed people after Mom died." Robert's jaw tightened at the mention of Carolyn, but he didn't look away. "The principal said they're expecting a good turnout Friday." Emma nodded cautiously, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "I'm working security at the hardware store that night," he continued, "but I've asked if I can start my shift late so I can attend your fundraiser." Emma's eyes widened. "Really?" "I'm not making any promises about the dog, Emma, but I want to support you. It wasn't everything, but it was something, the first real connection they'd shared in months." Friday arrived with unexpected energy. The normally subdued Millfield Elementary buzzed with excitement as volunteers transformed the gymnasium into an art gallery. Emma's paintings, landscapes, animals, and abstract pieces that somehow captured complex emotions were displayed prominently, alongside contributions from other student artists. "You've inspired them," Ms. Jackson told Emma as they hung the last piece. "Many of these children have never created art for a cause before." By the time the doors opened at 5 p.m., a small crowd had gathered outside. Principal Dawson welcomed families, teachers, and community members, directing them to the refreshments table Margaret had organized and the donation box decorated with paw prints. Emma stood nervously beside her artwork, explaining to visitors how she'd found Max and why saving him mattered so much. Some listened politely before moving on, but others seemed genuinely moved. Her first painting sold within minutes. A watercolor of a German shepherd gazing across an open field, somehow conveying both strength and vulnerability. An hour into the event, Jessica Parker from the Millfield Gazette arrived, camera in hand. "So, you're the young artist I've been hearing about," she said, kneeling to Emma's level. "Would you mind telling me about your fundraiser?" Emma recounted the story while Jessica took notes, occasionally asking questions about Max's condition and the veterinary clinic's impending closure. "You know," Jessica said thoughtfully, "this story has all the elements people need right now: courage, compassion, community. Would it be all right if I featured you in tomorrow's paper? It might help reach more donors." Before Emma could answer, she spotted her father entering the gymnasium, still in his hardware store uniform but freshly washed. Their eyes met across the room, and he gave her a small nod. "Yes," Emma told the reporter, a new confidence in her voice. "I want everyone to know about Max." The evening exceeded everyone's expectations. Emma's artwork nearly sold out, and the donation box filled steadily. When Principal Dawson announced the total, just over $1,700.00, Emma felt a surge of hope. Combined with her savings and her grandmother's contribution, they had almost reached the halfway mark. As families began to leave, Robert approached his daughter. "You did good, Em. Mom would be proud." The simple words, especially the mention of her mother, brought tears to Emma's eyes. "Thanks, Dad." A commotion at the gymnasium entrance interrupted their moment. Dr. Bennett had arrived, her medical scrubs partially hidden under a hastily donned coat. "Emma," she called, scanning the room. When she spotted the Wilsons, she hurried over, her expression urgent. "I need to speak with you all." Robert instinctively placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "Is something wrong with the dog?" "Max developed a fever this afternoon," Dr. Bennett explained. "I'm concerned about infections setting in. We really can't wait much longer for the surgery." Emma looked up at her father, panic rising. "But we don't have enough money yet." Robert's face clouded. He'd begun to support his daughter's fundraising efforts, but the reality of their financial situation hadn't changed. Before he could respond, Dr. Bennett continued. "That's actually why I'm here. Someone called the clinic an hour ago after seeing your story shared on social media. They've offered to cover the remaining cost of Max's first surgery." "Who?" Margaret asked, joining them. "They asked to remain anonymous," Dr. Bennett replied. "All they said was they understand what it means to be given a second chance." Emma could hardly believe what she was hearing. "So Max can have his surgery tomorrow?" Dr. Bennett nodded. "First thing in the morning. It's still going to be a long road to recovery, but this gives him a fighting chance." For the first time in 2 years, Emma threw her arms around her father's waist and held tight. After a moment's hesitation, Robert hugged her back. Early the next morning, the Wilsons arrived at the clinic. Margaret had insisted on joining them despite having slept poorly, her arthritis particularly troublesome. Emma clutched a small stuffed animal she'd bought for Max with her own money. Dr. Bennett met them in the waiting room, her expression serious but optimistic. "The surgery will take several hours. You're welcome to wait, but it might be better if you go home, and I'll call you when we're finished." "Well, wait," Emma said firmly, and neither her father nor grandmother contradicted her. As the hours passed, the small waiting room began to fill with unexpected visitors. Principal Dawson stopped by with coffee and pastries. Miss Jackson arrived with a handmade get-well card signed by Emma's classmates. Even Mr. Peterson from the hardware store appeared briefly to check on the famous Hero dog. "Word travels fast in a small town," Margaret observed, watching Emma's surprise at each new arrival. The Millfield Gazette had published Jessica Parker's article that morning with a front-page photo of Emma standing beside one of her paintings, a striking image of hands cupped together, protecting a flickering light. The headline read, "8-year-old artist fights to save hero dog." By early afternoon, the clinic's phone rang constantly with people asking how they could help. Dr. Bennett's assistant created a waiting list of those willing to contribute toward Max's ongoing care, or adopt other animals from the struggling clinic. "I've never seen anything like it," the assistant told Margaret in a hushed tone. Dr. Bennett was going to close the clinic in 2 weeks, but with this kind of community support. Just after 3 p.m., Dr. Bennett emerged from surgery, her face lined with exhaustion but smiling. "He made it through. We've set the leg properly, repaired some internal damage, and cleaned out the infected areas." "Is he going to be okay?" Emma asked, clutching her grandmother's hand. "He's got a challenging recovery ahead, but German Shepherds are resilient. And this one," Dr. Bennett's smile widened, "this one seems to have something special to live for." Relief washed over Emma. "Can I see him?" "He's still under anesthesia, but you can peek in for just a moment. Then I'd recommend you all go home and get some rest. Tomorrow will be critical in his recovery." Dr. Bennett led them to a recovery area where Max lay on a padded table, bandaged and intubated, his massive form somehow looking smaller and more vulnerable than before. Emma approached slowly, laying her hand gently on his head. "I'm here, Max," she whispered. "You're not alone anymore." In the days that followed, Emma divided her time between school and the veterinary clinic. Max's condition improved steadily, though he remained weak and heavily sedated for pain management. The community's response continued to grow, with donations arriving from neighboring towns after Jessica's article was picked up by regional news outlets. A week after the surgery, Emma arrived at the clinic to find Max sitting up in his kennel, alert for the first time since his operation. His tail thumped against the floor when he saw her, and Emma felt a bubble of pure joy rise within her. "Look at you," she exclaimed, carefully kneeling by his kennel. "You're sitting up." Dr. Bennett joined them, clipboard in hand. "His vitals are strong, and the incision sites are healing nicely, no sign of further infection." "When can he come home?" Emma asked, then immediately glanced at her father, who stood a few paces back. They hadn't discussed what would happen to Max after his recovery. Robert cleared his throat. "That's something we should talk about as a family, Emma." Before they could continue this conversation, the clinic's front door chimed. Dr. Bennett excused herself to greet the new arrivals. Minutes later, she returned with a well-dressed couple in their 40s. "Mr. and Mrs. Taylor would like to speak with you," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "About Max." The couple stepped forward, their expensive clothing and polished appearance immediately setting them apart in the modest clinic. "You must be Emma," the woman said with a practiced smile. "We read about you in the paper. Such a kind-hearted thing you'd done." Emma instinctively moved closer to Max's kennel. "Thank you." "What my wife is trying to say," the man interjected, "is that we believe this dog belongs to us. Our Belgian Malinois Rambo went missing about 2 weeks ago. When we saw the article—" "Max is a German Shepherd," Emma said quietly. The man waved his hand dismissively. "The paper could have gotten the breed wrong, and Rambo is a trained service dog, just like your Max." Dr. Bennett folded her arms. "Do you have any documentation? Photos?" "Of course," Mrs. Taylor said, pulling out her phone. She showed them a photo of a large dog that, to someone unfamiliar with dog breeds, might resemble Max. "See? That's our Rambo." Emma looked at the photo, then at Max, who had begun to growl softly, the first sound she'd heard him make other than whimpers of pain. "What was your dog's service background?" Robert asked suddenly. His security training had made him observant of details, and something about this couple didn't sit right. The Taylors exchanged a quick glance. "He was trained for search and rescue," Mr. Taylor replied. "Used to work with the county before we, acquired him for our personal security company." "And you have his service records, vaccination history?" Robert pressed. "We can get those to you," Mrs. Taylor said quickly, "but we'd like to take our dog home today. We'd be happy to reimburse the cost of his care, of course." Emma looked pleadingly at her father. Something was wrong. Max's reaction, the couple's vague answers, the convenient timing, it all felt wrong. "I think," Robert said slowly, "we'll need to see proper documentation before any decisions are made, and since the community has invested in this dog's recovery, they might have questions too." The atmosphere in the room shifted. Mr. Taylor's smile faded. "We could take this to the authorities." "You could," Bennett agreed. "In fact, I think that's an excellent idea. I've already been in contact with the K-9 Training Center trying to trace Mac's origins. I'm sure they'd be interested in meeting you." A tense silence followed. Then Mrs. Taylor tugged at her husband's sleeve. "We should go, Richard. Get the paperwork in order." As they turned to leave, Mrs. Taylor paused. "By the way, how much has been raised for the dog's care? Perhaps we could make a donation." "For your trouble?" The implication was clear. They wanted to know how much money had been collected. "The clinic will provide a full accounting to any legitimate owner," Dr. Bennett replied coolly. "Good day." After they left, Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "They're lying, aren't they?" Robert nodded, his expression grim. "Yes, I think they are. But why would anyone lie about owning Max?" "I don't know, Em," Robert said, though his tone suggested he had his suspicions. "But I promise you this, we're going to find out." The morning after the Taylors' visit, Emma woke to the sound of hushed voices downstairs. Still in her pajamas, she crept to the top of the staircase, straining to hear her father and grandmother's conversation. "I don't like it, Mom," Robert was saying. "The timing is too convenient. They show up right after the newspaper article mentions the fundraising success." "Do you think they're after the money?" Margaret asked. "Maybe. Or maybe they're the ones who abandoned Max in the first place." Emma's heart pounded. The idea that someone could hurt Max and then try to claim him made her stomach twist with anger and fear. "What are we going to do?" Margaret's voice carried up the stairs. "I've already called Jessica at the Gazette. She's going to help us look into this couple. And I spoke with Sheriff Davis this morning." Emma couldn't stay hidden any longer. She descended the stairs, making her presence known. "Are they going to take Max away?" Robert and Margaret exchanged glances, surprised by her sudden appearance. "No, Emma," Robert assured her, gesturing for her to join them at the kitchen table. "No one's taking Max anywhere until we know the truth." "Your father's right," Margaret added, pouring a glass of orange juice for her granddaughter. "Sheriff Davis is checking into the Taylors' claims. In the meantime, Dr. Bennett says Max is doing well enough that we can visit him together this afternoon." Emma's face brightened momentarily before clouding over again. "What if they come back with fake papers or something?" Robert rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "That's a possibility. But legitimate service dogs have records, training certifications, medical history. If they try to falsify those, we'll know." He hesitated, then added, "I've also reached out to some contacts from my security work. There are databases for K-9 officers. We might be able to trace Max's original unit." This was a side of her father Emma rarely saw. Decisive, proactive, fighting for something rather than just enduring each day. It reminded her of how he'd been before her mother died. By mid-afternoon, the Wilsons arrived at the veterinary clinic to find an unexpected scene. A small crowd had gathered outside, many holding homemade signs. "Max stays in Millfield," and "We stand with Emma." "What's happening?" Emma asked as they approached. They met them at the entrance, looking both frazzled and touched. "Word got out about the Taylor's claim. Apparently someone overheard our conversation yesterday and posted about it online. The community is responding." Indeed, Emma recognized many faces from school. Parents, teachers, even Principal Dawson standing with a coffee in hand, chatting with other supporters. "All these people came for Max?" Emma whispered, overwhelmed. "They came for both of you," Dr. Bennett replied. "Your story has touched a lot of hearts." Inside, they found Max alert and noticeably stronger. His tail wagged enthusiastically when he spotted Emma, and he attempted to stand before wincing at the effort. "Easy, boy," Dr. Bennett cautioned, opening the kennel door so Emma could enter. "He's healing well, but that leg needs time." Emma sat beside Max on the floor, gently stroking his head while he rested his muzzle on her lap. The connection between them was palpable even to Robert, who had kept his distance until now. "He really does trust you," he observed, kneeling beside the kennel entrance. "He knows I won't hurt him," Emma said simply. A commotion outside interrupted their moment. Through the clinic windows, they could see the Taylors' luxury SUV pulling into the parking lot, causing the crowd to press closer together, effectively blocking the entrance. "They're back," Margaret said, her voice tight with concern. Robert stood. "I'll handle this." Outside, Richard Taylor emerged from his vehicle, his face flushed with anger as he confronted the crowd. "This is private property. You can't prevent us from accessing a business." "Actually," Jessica Parker stepped forward, press badge visible, "the clinic is privately owned, and Dr. Bennett has the right to refuse service to anyone." "We're not here for service," he snapped. "We're here to reclaim our property." Sheriff Davis's patrol car pulled up behind the Taylor's SUV, its lights flashing. The sheriff, a stocky man with a weathered face and deliberate manner, approached the scene. "Folks, let's keep this civil," he addressed the crowd before turning to the Taylors. "Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, I believe we spoke on the phone this morning about providing documentation." Mrs. Taylor produced a folder, handing it to the sheriff with an air of triumphant certainty. "Everything's in order. Training certificates, veterinary records, even his purchase receipt." Sheriff Davis reviewed the document slowly, his expression unreadable. By now, Robert had joined them outside, standing at the sheriff's shoulder. "These seem comprehensive," Sheriff Davis finally said. "But there's a problem." "What problem?" Mr. Taylor demanded. "I've been in contact with the Canine Training Center in Springfield. The serial number on this certificate doesn't match their records." The sheriff's voice remained steady. "And this veterinary clinic listed here? They've never heard of a dog matching this description registered to you." Mrs. Taylor's composure slipped. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake, ma'am," the sheriff continued. "But what's interesting is they do have records of a German Shepherd named Max, who went missing from their program 6 months ago, injured during a training exercise and allegedly transported for veterinary care, but never arrived." The crowd murmured as the implications became clear. "You stole him," Robert said, the realization dawning. "You were responsible for his training, weren't you? Something went wrong, and rather than face consequences—" "You can't prove any of this," Mr. Taylor interrupted, his face now pale beneath his tan. "Actually," Jessica Parker stepped forward again, holding up her phone, "I've been recording this conversation, and I've spent the last 24 hours researching Taylor's security services. Found some interesting complaints about your company falsifying credentials for your guard dogs. Several clients mentioned dogs that seemed untrained or improperly socialized." Sheriff Davis turned to the Taylors. "I think we should continue this conversation at the station." "This is absurd," Mrs. Taylor protested. "We just want our dog back." A dog you left for dead by the side of the road." Dr. Bennett had emerged from the clinic, her voice carrying across the now silent parking lot. Max's injuries weren't just from being hit by a car. He had defensive wounds, consistent with being struck repeatedly before the accident. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. Emma, who had followed Dr. Bennett outside despite her grandmother's attempt to keep her inside, felt tears spring to her eyes. "They hurt him on purpose?" she asked, her voice small but clear. Dr. Bennett nodded grimly. "I believe so, probably when he didn't perform as expected." Mr. Taylor's face contorted with rage. "You have no right to keep what belongs to us. Do you know how much a trained German shepherd is worth? Thousands of dollars. We'll sue this entire backwater town." "Richard," Mrs. Taylor hissed, grabbing his arm, "stop talking." But the damage was done. Even those in the crowd who might have sympathized with someone losing a pet could see the truth now. The Taylors viewed Max as property, an investment gone bad. Sheriff Davis gestured to his patrol car. "Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, I'd like you to accompany me to the station to answer some questions about falsifying documents and animal cruelty charges." "This isn't over," Mr. Taylor threatened as the sheriff escorted them away. "That dog is valuable property." "That dog," Robert responded, his voice steady, "is a member of our family now." The words hung in the air. Emma stared at her father, hardly daring to believe what she'd heard. For the first time since finding Max, Robert had claimed him, not just as Emma's project or a community cause, but as part of their family. As the patrol car drove away, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. People surged forward to congratulate Emma and her family, many offering continued support for Max's ongoing care. Inside the clinic, Emma knelt beside Max again, who seemed agitated by the commotion outside. "It's okay," she whispered, stroking his fur. "They can't hurt you anymore. You're safe now." Dr. Bennett approached with a cautious smile. "This is wonderful news, but there's still a long road ahead. Max will need additional surgeries, physical therapy, training to overcome his trauma." "Whatever it takes," Robert said, surprising everyone with his firmness. "We've come this far. We'll see it through." That evening, the Wilsons gathered around their kitchen table, the day's events still fresh in their minds. Jessica Parker's preliminary article about the confrontation had already gone live online, generating hundreds of supportive comments and even more donations. "The fund has nearly reached $10,000, Margaret announced, checking the fundraising page on her tablet. "People from all over the state are contributing." "That should cover Max's remaining surgeries," Robert nodded. "But there's another issue we need to discuss." Emma tensed, waiting. "Max will need a home when he's recovered enough to leave the clinic," Robert continued. "A stable environment where he can heal completely." "Dad, please," Emma began. Robert held up his hand. "Let me finish, Em. I spent 2 years being afraid, of moving forward, of feeling anything too deeply, of losing what little we have left. Watching you fight for Max made me realize how much I've been holding us both back." Emma sat perfectly still, hardly breathing. "I don't know if I'll ever completely get over my fear of dogs," Robert admitted. "But I'm willing to try. For you. For us. If that means bringing Max home, then that's what we'll do." Emma launched herself into her father's arms, tears flowing freely. Robert held her tightly, his own eyes damp. "There will be rules," he added, once Emma had settled. "Training, boundaries. Max has been through trauma, and so have we. We'll need to learn together." "I promise I'll do everything right," Emma vowed. Margaret watched her son and granddaughter with quiet satisfaction. She'd known all along that saving Max wasn't just about the dog. It was about saving their family, too. "There's one more thing," Robert said, reaching for a folder on the counter. "Sheriff Davis dropped this off after the Taylors were processed. It's Max's original service record." He spread the papers on the table. training evaluations, medical records, and photographs of a younger, healthier Max in his working harness. "It says here he was exceptionally good at finding people," Robert noted. "Rescue operations, missing persons. He has commendations for locating a lost child during a blizzard and for finding survivors after that apartment collapse in Springfield 2 years ago." "He's a real hero," Emma whispered, tracing her finger over a photo of Max receiving a ceremonial medal. "Yes," Robert agreed, "and heroes deserve second chances." As night fell over Millfield, the small house at the edge of town felt different. Warmer, somehow, as if its walls were finally exhaling after holding their breath for too long. A family broken by loss had found an unexpected path toward healing, through the simple act of saving something else that was broken. And across town, in the quiet darkness of the veterinary clinic, Max slept peacefully for the first time since his rescue, his dreams no longer haunted by abandonment and pain. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but it would also bring Emma's gentle hands and, remarkably, a home waiting to welcome him. 3 weeks after the confrontation with the Taylors, the early winter chill settled over Millfield like a heavy blanket. Margaret stood at the kitchen window, watching the season's first snowflakes drift lazily from a steel-grey sky. Her arthritis had worsened with the changing weather, turning simple tasks into exercises in endurance. "Grandma, did you take your medicine?" Emma asked, setting her backpack down by the door. She'd grown more attentive to her grandmother's needs lately, noticing the small winces and the way Margaret's hands sometimes trembled when she thought no one was looking. "Yes, dear," Margaret smiled, though the pain was evident in the tight lines around her eyes. "How was school today?" "Better," Emma said, hanging up her coat. "Miss Jackson says my new paintings show emotional depth, and Lily Henderson asked if she could visit Max sometime." "Lily? The girl who was unkind to you?" Emma nodded. "She said her dog died last summer and her parents won't let her get another one," she shrugged. "I told her maybe after Max comes home." The mention of Max brought a mutual smile. His recovery had progressed steadily under Dr. Bennett's care. The surgical repair to his leg had been successful, and while he would always have a slight limp, he was finally beginning to put weight on it. The community's generosity had covered not only his medical expenses, but had also helped delay the veterinary clinic's closure, giving Dr. Bennett time to explore partnership options with a larger regional practice. "Your father called," Margaret said, turning from the window. "He's picking Max up at 4. The house is ready?" Emma nodded eagerly. They'd spent the weekend preparing for Max's homecoming, installing baby gates to restrict his movement during recovery, purchasing a specially orthopedic dog bed, and dog-proofing the downstairs. Robert had even built a sturdy ramp for the back steps so Max wouldn't have to navigate stairs with his healing leg. "I can't wait," Emma said, her voice vibrating with excitement. She glanced at the clock. 2 more hours. Margaret's smile faltered slightly as she reached for her teacup, a sharp pain shooting through her wrist. The cup clattered against the saucer. "Grandma?" Emma was instantly at her side. "Are you okay?" "Just these old bones complaining," Margaret assured her, though she sank heavily into a kitchen chair. "Nothing to worry about." Emma wasn't convinced. Her grandmother's complexion had grown ashen and her breathing seemed labored. "Should I call Dad?" No, Margaret waved dismissively. "He's working those extra shifts to prepare for Max's arrival. I'm just tired, dear. Perhaps I'll rest a bit before dinner." Emma helped her grandmother to the living room sofa, bringing her a blanket and making sure her medication was within reach. Margaret's deterioration over the past weeks had been subtle but unmistakable. More naps, less energy, the occasional skipped meal. Emma had overheard fragments of late-night conversations between her father and grandmother about doctor's appointments and test results, conversations that abruptly ended when they realized she was nearby. At 3:30, Robert called again. "I'm at the clinic," he told Emma. "Dr. Bennett wants to go over Max's home care instructions one more time. We might be a little late." "That's okay," Emma replied, glancing at her grandmother, who had fallen asleep on the sofa. "Take your time. Grandma's resting. Is she all right?" Robert's concern was immediate. "I think so. Just tired. Keep an eye on her, Emma. I'll be home as soon as I can." By 5 o'clock, Margaret's breathing had become more labored, and Emma couldn't wake her. Panic rising in her chest, she called her father's cell phone. When he didn't answer, she dialed the clinic directly. "Millfield Veterinary Clinic," Dr. Bennett's voice answered. "Dr. Bennett, it's Emma Wilson. Is my dad still there? I can't wake Grandma up, and she's breathing funny, and—" "Emma, slow down," Dr. Bennett interrupted, her voice shifting to a calm but urgent tone. "Your father just left with Max. What's happening with your grandmother?" Emma described Margaret's symptoms as best she could, her voice cracking with fear. "I'm calling an ambulance," Bennett decided. "Stay with her. Try to make her comfortable. I'll keep trying to reach your father." The next hour passed in a blur. Paramedics arrived, filling the small house with their efficient urgency. They spoke in the clipped, coded language of medical professionals, words like cardiac event and unstable filtering through Emma's haze of fear. As they prepared to transport Margaret, Robert finally arrived home, Max secured in the back of his truck. "Dad!" Emma cried, running to meet him in the driveway. "It's Grandma. They're taking her to the hospital." Robert's face drained of color. He quickly secured Max in the laundry room with his new bed and water bowl, then joined Emma in following the ambulance to Millfield General Hospital. The waiting room was cold and sterile, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across Robert's worried face as he completed paperwork. Emma sat rigidly in a molded plastic chair, her small hands clutched in her lap. "She's going to be okay, right?" she asked, her voice small. Robert paused, pen hovering over the form, the instinct to shield his daughter Ward with the promise he'd made after Caroline died. No more protective lies. "I don't know, Em. Grandma's heart isn't as strong as it used to be. Like Max's leg," Emma said, searching for something familiar to grasp onto. "Something like that," Robert nodded, grateful for her attempt to understand. "But people aren't as easy to fix as dogs sometimes." Hours crawled by. Emma curled against her father's side, drifting in and out of fitful sleep as various medical personnel came and went. Shortly after midnight, a doctor finally appeared. "Mr. Wilson, I'm Dr. Kaplan, your mother's attending physician." Robert gently shifted Emma and stood. "How is she?" "Stable for now, but I'm concerned. Your mother has experienced a moderate heart attack. There appears to be significant blockage in 2 coronary arteries. We've started medication to stabilize her condition, but she'll need surgery." "When?" Robert asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. "As soon as possible. Tomorrow morning. The procedure carries risks, particularly given her age and the arthritis medication she's been taking." Emma, who had been pretending to sleep, sat up. "Can we see her?" Dr. Kaplan softened at the sight of the small girl with puffy eyes and tousled hair. "Briefly, she needs to rest." Margaret lay small and pale against the hospital sheets, an oxygen tube beneath her nose and monitors beeping steadily beside her. When Emma entered the room, she managed a weak smile. "There's my brave girl," she whispered. Emma approached the bed cautiously, intimidated by the medical equipment. "Does it hurt?" "Not so much now," Margaret assured her. "They've given me good medicine." "You have to get better," Emma said firmly. "Max is home now. He needs to meet you." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I'm trying, sweetheart." Robert placed his hand over his mother's. "The doctor says you need surgery tomorrow." "Yes, they told me." Margaret's expression grew serious. "Robert, if something happens—" "Don't," he interrupted. "You're going to be fine." "Listen to me," she insisted, her voice stronger. "I've lived a good, long life. I've seen my granddaughter grow into an extraordinary person. I've watched my son become the man I always knew he could be." She squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens, promise me you two will keep moving forward. No more just surviving." Robert's jaw tightened as he fought back tears. "I promise." They were ushered out shortly after, told to go home and rest before returning in the morning. The house felt eerily quiet when they arrived. Max's soft whining from the laundry room, the only sound breaking the silence. "I should let him out," Robert said, his voice hollow. "Can I see him first?" Emma asked. Robert nodded, following his daughter to the laundry room. When they opened the door, Max was alert, his ears perked forward. He attempted to stand but wobbled on his healing leg. "Easy, boy," Robert cautioned. But Max was focused entirely on Emma, sensing her distress. He whined softly, struggling to reach her. Emma knelt beside him, burying her face in his fur as the tears she'd been holding back finally broke free. "Grandma's really sick," she sobbed. "Her heart's broken, and they have to fix it." Robert watched as the dog gently nuzzled his daughter, offering comfort in the most basic, instinctual way. Despite his lingering unease around large dogs, he found himself kneeling beside them, one hand on Emma's shaking shoulder, the other hesitantly touching Max's back. "We should all try to get some sleep," he finally said. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But sleep remained elusive. As midnight passed into the early hours of morning, Robert sat at the kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee before him, preparing for the possibility of another devastating loss. In the living room, Emma had finally succumbed to exhaustion on the sofa, Max lying vigilant on the floor beside her despite his injuries. The ringing phone shattered the pre-dawn quiet. Robert lunged for it, his heart in his throat. "Mr. Wilson, this is Nurse Alvarez from Millfield General. Your mother's condition has deteriorated. The doctor thinks we should perform the surgery immediately. You should come in as soon as possible." In that moment, as the first light of dawn crept across the horizon, the fragile new beginning they'd fought so hard for seemed in danger of crumbling before it had truly begun. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before them, its antiseptic scent burning Emma's nostrils as she gripped her father's hand. They'd arrived just after sunrise, having left Max reluctantly confined to the laundry room with extra water and his medication hidden in a piece of cheese. "Mr. Wilson?" Dr. Kaplan greeted them, his surgical cap already in place. "We're preparing your mother for surgery now. Her condition stabilized somewhat after we called, but we can't delay any longer." "Can we see her?" Robert asked, his voice rough from a sleepless night. "Very briefly. We're taking her to the operating room in 5 minutes." Margaret looked impossibly frail under the harsh hospital lights, but her eyes brightened when she saw Emma. "That's my girl," she whispered. "You going to be okay, Grandma?" Emma said with fierce determination, as if her certainty alone could guarantee the outcome. "Of course I am," Margaret replied, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She turned to Robert. "Take care of each other today, and don't forget Max needs his antibiotics at noon." "Mom," "Don't worry about it." "Promise me," she interrupted, suddenly urgent. "I promise," Robert nodded, bending to kiss her forehead. "Mrs. Wilson, it's time," a nurse announced from the doorway. As they wheeled Margaret away, Emma clutched her father's hand tighter. "She's coming back, right, Dad?" Robert knelt to her level, his hands on her shoulders. "The doctors are going to do everything they can, and your grandmother is the strongest person I know." He hesitated, then added, "But sometimes, even when everyone does everything right, things still don't work out the way we hope." Emma nodded solemnly. She'd learned that lesson when her mother died, despite all the treatments and prayers and bargains she'd offered to an unresponsive universe. The waiting began again, that peculiar suspended animation of hospital time where minutes stretched like hours. Robert paced while Emma flipped through dog-eared magazines without seeing the pages. "Dad," she said suddenly, setting aside a faded issue of National Geographic. "What about Max? He needs his medicine." Robert checked his watch. Almost 11:30. "You're right. The surgery could take hours, and we don't want to risk infection on that leg." They approached the nurse's station, where a kind-faced woman looked up from her computer. "The doctor's going to be in surgery for quite a while," she confirmed. "If you need to leave, we can call you with any updates." Outside, Robert hesitated by the truck. "I'm not comfortable leaving you here alone, but Max needs his care." "I could go with you," Emma suggested. "We could come right back." Robert considered this, weighing his conflicting responsibilities. "All right, we'll make it quick. In and out, take care of Max, then straight back here." The drive home was tense, both of them glancing at Robert's silent phone on the dashboard. When they pulled into the driveway, Emma rushed ahead to the laundry room door. "Max?" she called softly. A muffled whine answered her, followed by the scratch of claws against linoleum. When she opened the door, Max was standing, favoring his injured leg, but looking stronger than the day before. "Good boy," Emma praised, kneeling to check his bandages while Robert prepared the antibiotic. "Dr. Bennett said to make sure he takes all of this," Robert reminded her, hiding the pill in a small ball of peanut butter. Max accepted the treat readily, his amber eyes never leaving Emma's face. "He knows something's wrong," she observed. "He can feel it." Robert, who would have dismissed such a notion before Max entered their lives, found himself nodding. Animals sense things differently than we do. As Emma refilled Max's water bowl, Robert's phone finally rang. He answered immediately, his face tightening as he listened. "We'll be right there," he said, ending the call. "Is Grandma okay?" Emma asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "She's out of surgery, that's all they said." Robert's expression was carefully neutral, but Emma knew that tone, the one adults used when shielding children from difficult truths. "We have to go back now," she said, standing. Robert hesitated, glancing at Max, who had begun to pace anxiously, sensing their distress. "We can't leave him alone much longer. He's already been cooped up since yesterday afternoon." "Can't we take him with us? He could wait in the truck." "It's too cold for that, Em." A sudden determination straightened Emma's spine. "Then I'll stay here with him. You go to the hospital." "Absolutely not. You're 8 years old. And not leaving you home alone." "But, Dad." The phone rang again, interrupting their argument. Robert answered, listened for a moment, then closed his eyes briefly. "Thank you, yes, that would be very helpful." "What is it?" Emma asked as he ended the call. "That was Dr. Bennett. She heard about Grandma from Jessica Parker at the newspaper. She's offered to come watch Max, so we can both go to the hospital." Relief washed over Emma. "When?" "She's on her way now." Robert knelt to Emma's level. "Em, the nurse said Grandma's in critical condition. The surgery was more complicated than they expected." Emma's lower lip trembled. "Is she going to die? Like Mom?" The rawness of the question struck Robert like a physical blow. He pulled his daughter into a tight embrace. "I don't know, sweetheart. I hope not. But if that happens, we'll get through it together. I promise you won't be alone." Dr. Bennett arrived within 15 minutes, her kind eyes taking in their drawn faces. "Go," she urged them. "Max and I will be fine. I've brought some equipment to check his leg properly." "Thank you," Robert said, the words inadequate for the gratitude he felt. When they arrived back at the hospital, Dr. Kaplan was waiting for them. His surgical mask hung around his neck, and fatigue lined his face. "Mr. Wilson? Emma? Your mother made it through the surgery, but there were complications. Her heart stopped once on the table. We were able to resuscitate her, but she's very weak." "But she's alive?" Robert pressed. "Yes, but the next 24 hours are critical. She's in the ICU now." Margaret was barely recognizable beneath the oxygen mask and tangle of tubes and wires. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking each precious heartbeat. Emma approached the bedside cautiously. afraid that somehow her presence might disrupt the fragile balance keeping her grandmother alive. "Can she hear us?" she whispered. "We believe patients can often hear even when they appear unconscious," Dr. Kaplan replied. "Talk to her. It might help." Emma leaned close to Margaret's ear. "Grandma, it's me. Max is doing really good. His leg is getting stronger. Dr. Bennett is taking care of him right now so we can be with you." Her voice caught. "Please get better. We need you." As the hours passed, Emma curled up in a chair beside her grandmother's bed, eventually falling into exhausted sleep. Robert maintained his vigil, alternating between watching Margaret's monitors and checking his phone for updates from Dr. Bennett about Max. It was nearly midnight when a soft moan from the bed startled him to alertness. Margaret's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then gradually clearing. "Mom?" Robert leaned forward, taking her hand carefully around the IV line. Margaret's lips moved beneath the oxygen mask. Robert gently lifted it away so she could speak. "The children," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Emma's right here," Robert assured her, gesturing to the sleeping child. "She's fine." Margaret shook her head slightly, the effort clearly taxing. "No. Both children." Robert frowned, confused. "Both? Michael!" Margaret's eyes drifted closed again, her strength depleted by even this brief exchange. Robert sat back, stunned. "Michael!" His younger brother's name. The brother he hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade, not since their falling out after their father's funeral. The brother who had chosen a military career over helping with the family business, who had been absent when Robert needed him most. "Dad?" Emma stirred, blinking sleepily. "Was Grandma awake?" "Just for a moment," Robert replied, his mind still reeling from Margaret's words. Why would she mention Michael now? Was it simply confusion from the anesthesia? A nurse entered to check Margaret's vitals, noting the improvement in her readings. "This is good," she said encouragingly. "Her blood pressure is stabilizing." As morning approached, bringing with it a gray, snowy dawn, Dr. Bennett texted that Max was doing well but growing increasingly anxious. Something in her message, mentioning the dog's apparent distress whenever they approached the front door as if expecting someone, triggered a memory in Robert. The anonymous donation that had covered the rest of Max's initial surgery costs. The way the community had rallied so quickly after Jessica's article. The timing of it all. "Emma," he said suddenly, "remember when Dr. Bennett told us someone called the clinic offering to pay for Max's surgery after seeing the story online?" Emma nodded, rubbing her eyes. "The person who wanted to stay anonymous. Did Grandma ever seem, I don't know, like she knew something about that?" Emma considered the question. "She did check her phone a lot after that happened, and I caught her crying once when she was looking at it. But she said it was just her arthritis pain." Robert pulled out his own phone, scrolling through recent calls. There, from 3 weeks ago, a missed call from an out-of-state number he didn't recognize. He'd assumed it was a telemarketer and hadn't bothered to check the voicemail. With trembling fingers, he dialed his voicemail and entered his password. Several messages played. Work calls, a reminder about Emma's dental appointment, before a familiar voice filled his ear, a voice he hadn't heard in years. "Rob, it's Michael. Mom called me about Emma and the dog. I want to help. I'm stateside now. Call me back, please. It's time we talked." Robert lowered the phone slowly, pieces falling into place. The mysterious benefactor. Margaret's concern about both children. The K-9 unit connection. "Dad?" Emma asked, noticing his expression. "What is it?" Before he could answer, Dr. Kaplan entered, chart in hand. "Mr. Wilson, we've run some additional tests. Your mother is showing remarkable improvement since this morning. She's not out of the woods, but I'm cautiously optimistic." As relief flooded through him, Robert's phone chimed with a text message. An unknown number, but the content was unmistakable. Heard about Mom. I'm at Millfield General. I'm with Max and Dr. Bennett. We're in the parking lot if you want to see us." Michael. Robert stood frozen by the hospital room window, the text message glowing on his phone screen. Outside, fat snowflakes drifted lazily from an iron-gray sky, accumulating on the parking lot below. Somewhere out there, his estranged brother waited with the dog that had somehow, improbably, brought their family to this crossroads. "Dad?" Emma tugged at his sleeve. "Who texted you?" Robert drew a deep breath. "Your Uncle Michael is here." Emma's eyes widened. She'd seen photographs of Michael in old family albums and occasionally heard his name mentioned in hushed tones when adults thought she wasn't listening. But the man himself was a ghost, present only in the careful gaps her father left in family stories. "Why?" she asked. "I think," Robert said slowly, "he might be the one who helped pay for Mac's surgery." Emma processed this information, her forehead creasing with the effort of fitting this new piece into her understanding of the world. "Is he coming up to see Grandma?" "He's in the parking lot, with Max and Dr. Bennett." "Max is here?" Emma's face brightened, the mention of the dog momentarily overshadowing the mystery of her uncle's appearance. Robert glanced at his mother, sleeping peacefully now, her condition stabilized. The nurse had assured him they would call immediately if anything changed. "Let's go down," he decided, "just for a few minutes." The elevator ride to the ground floor was silent, both father and daughter absorbed in their thoughts. When the doors opened to the lobby, Robert hesitated, old wounds and pride warring with the undeniable pull of family. "Which way to the parking lot?" Emma asked, practical as always. Robert let her lead him through the sliding glass doors into the bitter December cold. They stood on the sidewalk, scanning the rows of vehicles until Emma spotted Dr. Bennett's familiar sedan, parked near the emergency entrance. And there they were. Bennett standing beside her car and leaning against the passenger door. A tall man in a military-style jacket, his dark hair cropped short. At his feet sat Max, alert despite his bandaged leg. A proper service vest now fitted over his broad chest. "Uncle Michael," Emma called out, breaking free from Robert's grasp and running across the slushy parking lot. Michael straightened, surprise and uncertainty flashing across a face that bore the Wilson family resemblance, the same strong jaw as Robert, the same deep-set eyes. "Emma?" he asked as she approached, his voice carrying on the cold air. Dr. Bennett stepped forward. "I hope it's okay that we came. Max was getting increasingly agitated at the house, and when I heard about Margaret—" "It's fine," Robert assured her, his eyes never leaving his brother. "Thank you for bringing them." An awkward silence fell between the brothers, 8 years of distance compressed into a few feet of snow-covered asphalt. It was Max who broke the impasse, recognizing Emma and attempting to rise despite his injuries. "Careful, boy," Michael cautioned, keeping a steadying hand on the dog's harness. Emma knelt beside Max, hugging him gently around his neck. "You came to see Grandma, didn't you?" she whispered into his fur. Michael cleared his throat. "He was getting pretty worked up at the house. Dr. Bennett thought it might be separation anxiety, but—" He shrugged. "I've worked with enough service dogs to recognize when they're trying to tell you something." "You work with service dogs?" Emma asked, looking up at her uncle with new interest. "I was a canine handler in the Army," Michael explained. "Still consult with the training program sometimes." Robert finally found his voice. "You knew Max was one of yours?" It wasn't a question, but Michael nodded anyway. "Not initially. When Mom called about Emma finding an injured German Shepherd with military tags, I was curious. When I saw Jessica's article with the photo," he trailed off, his expression turning pained. "I recognized him immediately. Max was one of my trainees about 2 years ago. Best tracking dog in the program." "That's why you donated the money," Robert said, understanding dawning. "You felt responsible." Michael's jaw tightened. I trusted the wrong people with him. The private security firm that bought him, the Taylors, they had excellent references. By the time we started hearing complaints about their treatment of the dogs, Max had already disappeared. He looked down at the animal beside him. Finding him alive is, well, it's something of a miracle. Emma had been following this exchange with growing excitement. Did you hear that, Max? Uncle Michael was your first trainer. Max's tail wagged at her enthusiasm, his intelligent eyes moving between the brothers as if following their conversation. He remembers you, Emma declared confidently. Michael smiled, the gesture softening the weathered planes of his face. Dogs don't forget the people who were kind to them, he glanced at Robert. Neither do people, usually. The unspoken history between them hung in the air, complicated and painful. Robert thought of his mother lying in the hospital bed upstairs. How close they'd come to losing her. How much time had already been wasted on old grievances. Mom's asking for you, he said finally. That's how I knew you were involved. She was calling your name when she woke up, briefly. Michael's composure faltered. Is she going to be all right? The doctors are cautiously optimistic. She's stable for now. Dr. Bennett, who had been tactfully keeping her distance during this family reunion, approached with an apologetic expression. I hate to interrupt, but there's something we should discuss regarding Max. She gestured to the service vest. Michael brought this when he arrived at your house this morning. I think it might be the key to helping Max fully recover, both physically and emotionally. What do you mean? Robert asked. Service dogs who lose their working role often struggle with depression, anxiety. They're purpose-bred and trained. Having a job isn't just what they do, it's who they are. But Max is injured, Emma pointed out. His leg will always be a little bit broken. That's what you said. Dr. Bennett nodded. He'll never return to police or military work, that's true. But there are other forms of service. She looked meaningfully at Emma. Like emotional support, therapy work. You think Max could be a therapy dog? Robert asked. With the right training, absolutely. He has the temperament for it, gentle, intuitive, patient, and he's already formed an incredible bond with Emma. Emma's eyes widened with possibility. He could help other kids or visit people in the hospital, like Grandma. Michael knelt beside Max, adjusting the vest straps with practiced hands. I could help with the training if that would be okay. He glanced up at his brother, the question extending beyond the dog's future. Robert felt the weight of the moment, the choice between clinging to past resentments or embracing an unexpected second chance. He thought of what Margaret had said before her surgery. No more, just surviving. I think, he said slowly, that would be good for all of us. Dr. Bennett smiled. There's one more thing. The hospital has a pet therapy program. Normally, animals need extensive certification before they can visit patients, but given the circumstances and Margaret's condition, I spoke with Dr. Kaplan. He's willing to make a one-time exception to allow Max a brief visit to her room. Emma gasped with delight. Really? Max can see Grandma? Just for a few minutes, Dr. Bennett cautioned, and only if she's awake and her vital signs remain stable. As if on cue, Robert's phone buzzed with a text from the floor nurse. Your mother is awake and asking for you. Upstairs, they found Margaret propped up slightly on her pillows, her face pale but her eyes clear and alert. She registered first Robert and Emma, then Dr. Bennett, and finally, standing uncertainly in the doorway, Michael. Her eyes filled with tears. My boys, she whispered, both my boys. Michael approached the bed cautiously. Hey, Mom, he said, his voice husky with emotion. You gave us quite a scare. Had to get you home somehow, she replied with a weak smile. Then her gaze shifted downward, landing on Max, who sat obediently at Michael's side, the perfect service dog despite his injuries. And who is this handsome fellow? "This is Max, Grandma," Emma said proudly. "The dog I told you about. Uncle Michael trained him before he got hurt." Margaret extended a trembling hand, which Max gently nuzzled. "So you're the one bringing my family back together," she murmured. "Clever boy." Dr. Bennett checked Margaret's monitors, nodding with satisfaction. "Everything looks stable. I think this visit is doing more good than harm." For several minutes they gathered around Margaret's bed, the broken family slowly finding its way back to wholeness. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, one hand on Mac's back. Michael stood at the foot of the bed, gradually relaxing as the initial awkwardness faded. Robert kept his post beside his mother, watching the scene with a sense of wonder. "When I found Max, I thought I was saving him," Emma said thoughtfully, stroking the dog's soft ears. "But he was really saving us, wasn't he?" Margaret smiled, wisdom shining through her exhaustion. "That's how love works, dear one. When we reach out to heal others, we often find our own healing in the process." The winter sunlight broke through the clouds, sending a shaft of golden light through the hospital window. It illuminated them all: the grandmother who had held the family together through grief, the father learning to open his heart again, the uncle finding his way home, the child whose compassion had started it all, and the wounded healer who had brought them together. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Millfield in a clean white blanket, a fresh page on which new stories could be written. The road ahead would hold challenges: Margaret's recovery, rebuilding relationships, Max's ongoing rehabilitation. But for the first time in years, they would face those challenges together. "Family photo," Emma announced suddenly, pulling out her phone. "Everyone squeeze in." And so they did, awkwardly, laughingly, imperfectly, gathering around Margaret's hospital bed, with Max sitting proudly in the center. In that moment, as the camera captured their image, they were not defined by their wounds or their losses, but by the love that had brought them back to each other. A beginning, not an ending, a family made whole again. In Emma and Mac's journey, we discover that it's never too late for healing to begin. Like many of you who've weathered life's storms, losing loved ones, experiencing family rifts that seemed beyond repair, or facing health crises that shook your foundation, this story reminds us that second chances arrive in unexpected packages. Remember when family gathered without effort, when relationships weren't complicated by years of silence. Emma's innocent determination to save a wounded creature brought her father back to life, reunited estranged brothers, and gave her grandmother something precious to fight for. This mirrors our own lives at this stage. We stand at crossroads where we can either hold tight to old wounds or reach for reconciliation before it's too late. The German Shepherd's loyalty, despite his abuse, parallels how our hearts remain capable of love despite past injuries. As retirement approaches and health concerns become more pressing, isn't it time to mend those broken connections? To make that call to the sibling you haven't spoken to in years? To forgive the child who disappointed you? To be as brave as 8-year-old Emma? Our remaining chapters can still be our most meaningful if we have the courage to open doors we once thought permanently closed. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.